Hello, and welcome to another NABBW Financial Podcast. I'm here with Pamela J. Sams to discuss our July topic, Can you actually afford to retire in your hometown? Welcome to our Zoom call. We're glad that you joined us for this complex, timely, and somewhat disturbing topic. Pam and I were just discussing that this is not something that either of us had been aware of before this research came out. So we're glad that you joined us to find out what's going on. As we dig into our chat tonight, keep in mind that for a couple of decades, we baby boomers have planned to age in place. That is, after retirement, we want to continue living in our homes as long as possible, instead of like our parents who had embraced the concept of moving to a retirement community. I remember when I was 50, my mother asked me when I was going to move to a retirement community. And I said, are you kidding? I don't ever plan to go that way. So she was very surprised. Anyway, tonight we're looking at recent research that indicates many of us will be severely challenged to afford to remain in our homes due to the rising cost of living in hundreds of our cities and towns. Pam and I started discussing this situation about a month ago, right after she sent me an article by Richard Eisenberg. There's a good chance you saw the article because I immediately posted it to the NABBW Facebook page. But if you're unfamiliar, the article, originally published by nextavenue.org and later picked up by Forbes.com, is titled Where Older Adults Are Most Financially Insecure, as in geographically where. And as I read it and dug into the research behind it, I became quite disturbed because it's fact-based, it's not media hype. The research was conducted by the University of Massachusetts Boston professor Jan Muchler at UMass's Gerontology Institute. As Eisenberg writes, the study, officially titled Aging in the 100 Largest Metropolitan Areas, How Do Older Adults Fare? References a report Muchler and her colleagues have created that they're calling the Elder Index. In brief, Muchler's research found that, and here I'm going to actually quote from the article so I get it exactly right. In each of the 100 biggest US metros, at least 37% of single residents aged 65 and older, and at least 12% of older couples are at risk of being unable to afford basic needs and age in their own homes. But things are much worse in certain places where at least 60% of older singles and 40% of older couples face this economic security, Muchler found. Her team has elder index numbers for each of the nation's 384 metro areas at the Elder Index website. And we'll talk about how you can find that later. To be honest, those numbers don't account for the potential cost of living total cost, because we have to factor in long-term care, which can also be exorbitant. There was a HealthView Services research and consulting firm report that done recently that estimates that eventual long-term care costs for an average healthy 65-year-old woman would be $373,712. I don't know why they know it's exactly $12, but that's what they're saying. It's probably some kind of math projection. And for a man, $237,368, excluding Medicare premiums and copays. So as I said, before we close the call, we'll let you know how to access the Elder Index so that you can search for your own community on it. I looked and I found my community and several other communities. It was fascinating to compare the communities, and I gives me an idea of that one of the things people might do is not only check their own community, but think about, if I want to move, what's it likely to be the difference. But you're probably going to talk a lot more about that, Pam, so I will let you get onto that. And let me just step back a little bit and introduce our call here. I'm Ann Holmes, your moderator and the Boomer-in-Chief of the National Association of Baby Boomer Women, an organization dedicated to educating and empowering women at midlife and beyond. And with me to answer our questions today is Pamela J. Sams, CRPC, MBA, BFA. Pam is an expert in personal finance, president of Jackson Sams Wealth Strategies in Herndon, Virginia, and a monthly guest who covers important information related to money and financial planning. She's a chartered retirement planning counselor and NABBW's retirement planning associate. We have one last bit of business before we launch into tonight's discussion, and that's for me to play a quick audio recording just to keep us legal here.
Securities offered through Securities America Incorporated, a registered broker-dealer. Member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Securities America Advisors Incorporated, a SEC-registered investment advisory firm. Pamela Sams, Investment Advisor Representative. Jackson Sams Wealth Strategies, Securities America Incorporated, and all other entities named are separate entities.
Thanks for joining us again tonight, Pam.
Yeah, thanks for having me once again. Very interesting topic. Just listening to the intro is that it's going to be a challenge for a lot of seniors in especially high cost areas. I live in Northern Virginia, and even with people speaking about retiring, it's a high cost of living area. And I don't see how anybody, if really can afford to live in the area if they don't have the proper resources. So very important topic to address. Probably not one of the most fun ones that we've talked about on our calls, but I think that's one of the areas that we need to start looking at. And prior to this call, prior to us, hitting record button, I talked about a lot of the articles talk about, is this going to be the next shoe to drop in terms of how it's going to affect us economically throughout kind of the economy, and how that's going to work for us in the future.
It's so interesting to say that, because when I used to introduce NABBW when I first bought it, one of the things I talked about is that we were supposedly the wealthiest, healthiest, and best educated generation to come along. And now that wealth situation seems to be trickling away from us in ways that we never thought it could happen. So, but thanks for your comments there. And let's dig right into the points you're sharing tonight, beginning with the research and the Elder Index. Let's start with, what is the Elder Index?
Yeah, in that article, they went and talked about the Elder Index. It's really essentially a cost of living measure for older adults. And it's really meant to be at the threshold to indicate where people need, what people need, and really to get by, what people really need to get by and then really remain independent in their own community. So, thus the article title, are we secure in our own community? Are we able to age in place like we thought we would? Now, that means really just the basic needs. That wouldn't be able to, go on vacation or give money to children or grandchildren, but it's really just what will they be able to need to be able to stay in their homes. And as you indicated before, the Elder Index does not factor in any long-term care costs. So we're just talking about the basics, food, shelter, and those sort of things, maybe transportation, the basic needs that most seniors, most of us need. And it doesn't even include all of the niceties that we think about when we want to retire, traveling and going on vacation and spending time with grandkids and maybe spoiling them and giving them money. Doesn't include any of that. And the numbers you also had stated is it doesn't factor in any medical. Right. That's a huge portion for most seniors is long-term care. So, I know Fidelity that did a study, several years ago as well, similar to the numbers that you had just stated, where, that's just Medicare premiums and Part B premiums and all of that. And it really just negates what you need in addition to long-term care. So, when I speak with my clients and I say, you may need another $275,000 to $300,000 just for medical costs, that's not even including just the cost of living in retirement. It's a startling number that people go, where the heck am I going to get that from? I just have this other pot of money that I want to retire on. Now you're telling me I need to come up with extra. And, I know a lot of times people go, well, what is that actually? And it is looking at, for example, if you retire at age 65 and you have a life expectancy, I usually plan for 95, that's a 30-year retirement. So you factor in kind of the medical costs for 30 years, you come up with, about 350,000, I believe was the last number Fidelity came up with. For generally the average couple who retires at 65, planning for a 30-year retirement to cover the medical costs. So the Elder Index is really meant to kind of do the basic cost of living measure for older adults really to see what people need and to get by and to live independent in their own communities. So that's what the Elder Index is.
Okay. I referenced a little briefly about how it was created, but could you go into a little bit more about
Yeah.
how it was created?
Mhm. Yeah, government survey data about how many people actually spend on housing and healthcare. And then what the survey did was really based on how much older people who don't work will need to live, or well, actually need to live and on a daily basis.
Mhm.
So this is food, basic needs, and then what they do is calculate the values for different areas around the country. So like I said, living in Northern Virginia, a little bit higher, so the elder index may be different, for where you live, and of course, if you live in a low cost of living area. But that's what it looks like. So it looks for something that could convey a sense of where people stand with respect to their retirement resources, and then whether continuing to work might be beneficial for them as well. So the way that it was really created was really to look at kind of what people spend on basic housing, healthcare, food, and shelter. Like I said, the basics. And then they did it across a broad spectrum with a survey to look at different areas across the country. And then that's how they come up with the elder index in each of the particular areas. I know they look at especially the big markets, California and, DC and all of these, Massachusetts, and probably get into some of the other cities. But they look at kind of the larger metropolitan areas first, and then of course, breaking it apart as well. So that's kind of how it was created, is really through the government survey data on looking at what seniors are spending money on and can they afford to cover the basic things that they need.
I'm kind of curious that normally in your experience as a professional advising clients, you've probably always said you have to allow for the cost of living adjustments, as which don't normally go down. Now and then they go down, but they
Yeah,
tend to always rise.
exactly.
But is having this elder index changing how you consult with people or counsel people, because now you have more facts than you might have had available to you before as to
Yeah, it's very helpful because then we can look at particular areas that people want to relocate if they want to stay in this area. Looking at what the elder index would be. Generally, I look at maybe probably a 3 to 4% inflation rate when I do planning. So I kind of incorporate what the elder index would be. If it's in line with that, then we would stick with those particular variables. But it's good to know what the number is if they want to relocate to certain areas, really to make sure they're going to keep pace with inflation, because that's where most people downturn is that they move to an area, don't consider what the cost of living could be in particular regions. Then either you have to relocate, you may not be able to stay in your home for a long period of time that you had anticipated for, or maybe looking at another area that the cost of living is a little bit cheaper. In our area, most people kind of venture down to either Florida or the Carolinas or something like that. They will be able to be a little bit more affordable. But knowing that what the elder index is in particular regions is very helpful for planning.
Okay. Now, why is there a higher percentage of people having economic insecurity issues?
Yeah. So, across the country in general, it's going to cost much more than we would have suggested just by, getting by with the poverty line to get by. It's going to cost more than people get from Social Security. That's what happens over time, is that Social Security benefits don't go up a whole lot. There's a little cost of living adjustment for Social Security. But if people are really just relying on that, especially with the switch back, I believe, in probably in the 70s, actually probably more in the 80s, really switching from what they call defined benefit plans, which would have been more pensions, to defined contribution plans, which are 401ks. A lot of people weren't able to save enough money. So a lot of them relied on Social Security as that kind of what I call the three-legged stool,
Hmm.
either a pension or Social Security or your own savings. So if one of those legs are knocked out, which is like your pension, you only have pretty much your own savings and Social Security. And then a lot of people may not have saved as much, then you're relying a lot on Social Security. I went to a symposium pre-COVID
Hmm.
in the nation's capital, where there's the Women Institute for Secure Retirement. It's called WISER. They have a summit every year. It really talks about particularly women
Hmm.
on how they're sustaining in retirement. And the statistics were really startling. It was probably over 60, 65% of women. The sole source of income in retirement was Social Security. So if that's what they're really living off of, that's where there's going to be economic insecurities over time if you're only relying on a Social Security check. In every area, no matter what the county you're going to be looking at, and what state and metropolitans, the elder index is going to be higher than the average Social Security benefit. That's
Hmm.
just clear that people aren't going to be able to live on Social Security alone. So that's why you get such a high percentage of economic insecurity issues. With a lot of seniors, if they're particularly relying on Social Security. And then really, focusing on people who live alone nationwide, do not have income sufficient to cover any cost of living in that location where they live. So it really suggests that a lot of people are just really struggling out there because they just don't have the resources or the retirement income that they thought they would. Especially if you look at older boomers who, like I said, may or may not have had a pension, or a lot of pensions are revising. They
Hmm.
thought they were going to have a significant portion of that, and a lot of the companies are coming back and saying, no, we're not going to cover as much as we thought we were with pensions. And then that leaves
Hmm.
you primarily with a lower pension, and then just Social Security for retirement income. And then you have the cost of living that keeps going up and up and up. So that's why you have a really high percentage of economic insecurity with seniors. And like I was talking to you before, it's just a really scary statistic that we have a lot of people aging into retirement that may not have the security that the previous generation had. And how are we going to deal with it as a country,
Hmm.
basically, with having a lot of economic insecurity with a lot of our seniors.
All right. Well, we'll have to see if the Republicans and the Democrats can come together to come up with a solution for that.
Exactly, whatever the solution is on that, but it may be something that you need to address. I know, it's always Medicare and Social Security has always been a form of contention
Hmm.
in Congress on what needs to happen there. But I think it's ever so important, not to get political, but it's really ever so important to really address those sooner rather than later,
Right.
as we think about how this is going to ripple through our economy.
Hmm. All right. Now, the next point you've alluded to a little bit, the fact that our retirement income is coming from maybe only one leg of a stool instead of three
Mhm.
legs. But let's talk a little bit more about retirement income.
Yeah, so looking at retirement income, about 1/5 of adults age 65 and older are in the workforce right now. As of that was March of last year that statistic came about, because really seniors are working longer because
Hmm.
of financial necessity with little savings that I talked about before. So people are working much longer than they had anticipated,
Hmm.
especially after last year, where a lot of people kind of figured maybe they wanted to retire, and then COVID hit, and then there was a fairly big downturn in the market, March of 2020. Since then, we have recovered quite a bit, but that kind of spooked people on, maybe I need to work a little bit longer in order to save more. And working people who are, economically insecure often stay on the job way past retirement age. A lot of times people come to me and they say, I don't know if I'm ever going to be a retire, or I'm looking at 70, or I'm looking at 72, or, the numbers keep getting higher and higher
Hmm.
as I speak to people, especially if they come to me a little bit later on. Some of my younger people, a little bit longer time horizon to work with, but if you're going well into almost into your 60s and you're still behind the curve, there's really only not a lot of options when it comes to retirement income. They may have to work a little bit longer. And then, of course, the way to fix any gap is to either reduce your spending, go to a cost of living, an area that the cost of living is a little bit cheaper, or spend less, save more, or work longer. And so a
Hmm.
lot of people are choosing to work longer on there. But in terms of kind of the retirement income, a majority don't work, do not work, and they have fewer options on continued income. So really figuring out, if you're able to, contribute to your retirement plans through your employer, that's one resource, because a lot of it now is the employee has to take ownership of
Hmm.
their retirement, not like
Right.
the old days where there was a pension available. So, going back to that three-legged stool, if Social Security is one of the options, what else do you have out there for retirement income? Is it your 401k? Is it your IRA? Is it additional savings? Maybe you downsize and sell your property and you take the proceeds from your home as a chunk that you can save additional for retirement. Whatever the case may be, is that this is where you need to start figuring out what retirement income sources that you do have, and then how long are those resources going to last. Just everybody comes to me and say, I need $1 million, I need $1 million. Everybody hears that number, with that $1 million number, that could be less or it could be substantially more,
Hmm.
depending on where you're going to live. Talking about our elder index, $1 million may not go as far as you think it is over 30-year retirement. So
Right.
that number is different for everyone. And so with the resources that people have accumulative, Social Security is basically uh, similar to an annuity, where you're going to get it for pretty much for the rest of your life. But all of the other resources, how are you going to take it efficiently? Do you convert it to income? Do you
Hmm.
continue to have it exposed to the market, knowing there's maybe some volatility there? So, I think as people start to think about retirement, the first thing is really, what do I have coming in for retirement income? Because that's going to basically dictate what that, are you going to be able to sustain a 30-year retirement, 30 plus year retirement efficiently, without having to really worry about this situation with the cost of living going up and up and up, and you're not being able to sustain your basic needs. Now, most of kind of the what they call the wealthier um, savers, or people who retire, generally have access to a pension or much more, assets that are available. So I wouldn't say they don't have to worry, but they have more resources in play versus, maybe one, two, or three resources with that. So think about the retirement income as you start considering where you want to live, and then, because of course, checking the elder index and then what the cost of living may be in the areas
Hmm.
that you're considering.
All right. Well, after you look at your retirement income, I think probably you would tell them the next thing that they need to look at is the status of their debt.
Yeah, yeah, that tends to be one of those things that really, I always suggest paying that off if you can.
Hmm.
At least the consumer debt. Sometimes having a mortgage in retirement is not as bad, but any consumer debt, if you're servicing debt in retirement, that's just really taken away from your resources there. The percentage of households really headed by adults aged 65 and older. Last year, actually, it was 2016. Sorry, the survey that I have was about 41%, 41.5% was in 1992, and then it jumped all the way up to 60% in 2016, and then even more, um, since that time period. So really having credit card balances in retirement is, like I said, it's just really going to take away from your resources that you have available. So if you need to live off of a certain amount of money per month in order to cover your basic needs, and then you have to tack on a credit card payment, that's just going to take away from that. So if
Mhm.
you're able to pay down as much debt as possible before going into retirement, really focus in on that. And unfortunately, what I've read recently as well is a lot of times, especially with medical bills and all of that, unfortunately, a lot of seniors are using their credit cards to pay some of these things like medical bills and things like that, which is really unfortunate, because then that's going to accumulate more debt than necessary. But that's one of those things you have to kind of think about with how to deal with the medical costs, the high cost of medical costs
Mhm.
in our area.
Well, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit more about seniors and healthcare costs, because I think that it's a rare person who becomes a senior and doesn't have some kind of health issue. So I think
Yeah.
as we get older, our healthcare costs just, it's probably universal that they're going to go up.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's so many other things that go wrong. I guess as we as we age,
Hmm.
things. I guess people always say you're falling apart or something like that. But that attributes to higher medical costs. But higher out-of-pocket medical costs can really contribute to high rates of poverty among seniors, unfortunately. Health expenditures are growing dramatically. Medical spending for older adults is roughly twice as much as middle-aged adults, like we were saying before, because
Hmm.
of we need certain things and pills and all of these procedures and all of that. Is in the rising cost of health care, really contributes to more bankruptcies, unfortunately, in our country, because the bills keep stacking up and up and up. Is increasingly difficult for seniors to really managing the rising cost of healthcare costs. And as a result of that increasing cost, for the federal government really to operate Medicare as well. So,
Hmm.
like I said, not to get political, but if you're looking at Medicare and not covering as much as it used to, and then the high cost of just maintenance
Hmm.
for healthcare, then that puts a lot of seniors, and actually put a lot of people, especially seniors, into a little bit of a situation where they may not be able to afford the cost of care. And like I said before, it contributes to a lot of bankruptcy in seniors who the bills keep piling up and they don't see any other way to get out of it, end up filing for bankruptcy just because of the increased cost of healthcare expenditures that they're not able to keep up with as well. And that takes us back to that huge number
Hmm.
that, if you're able to have some foresight and maybe save a little bit more for healthcare costs, additional healthcare costs in retirement, in addition to what you save for your own retirement, retirement expenses, then maybe you're a little bit behind, ahead of the curve. But if you all of a sudden are thrown into, hey, now I have a lot of healthcare costs, and you hadn't planned for it, that's where people get in trouble as
Hmm.
well. And unfortunately, Medicare may be the only option for some people. I know some people retire from an employer that may have retiree benefits that cover their health insurance. Uh,
Hmm.
then that may be an option as well. But for others, Medicare is it for them. And so planning accordingly, the 80, we had talked about it before, Medicare only covers 80%, and then you're out of pocket, it's a co-insurance 20%, or you get a Medicare supplement plan to fill in that 20% that you have, but then your Medicare premiums for your plan for the supplement plan, you have to account for that, and that
Hmm.
keeps going up based
Right.
on your age as well. So it seems like you kind of get ahead a little bit and you fall behind a little bit but knowing what your Part B premiums are for your Medicare, along with any supplement plans, so you can start planning for healthcare costs a little bit in retirement. That's why speak with my clients all the time. It's not one of those great conversations that, hey, we want to talk about what are we going to do in retirement, all the fancy trips and all of these things. But
Right.
I also, as their advisor, have to let them know down the road sometime, the trips are going to stop. And then healthcare costs are going to increase. In the beginning of retirement, you may spend more money towards the travel and all of the things that you want to do in retirement. And then on the second half, the second part of your retirement, you're really concerned about healthcare costs on really keeping up with maybe procedures or pills or whatever you need there. So planning accordingly on what those costs could be. Not to say we have a crystal ball on what they are,
Right.
but you need to know, a lot of people aren't familiar that there is a Part B premium, and that is based on your adjusted gross income each year. And so that number is not going to be stagnant. It could go up, it can go down, along with like I said, the supplement plan. If you want to fill in the gap there, that's a cost. And then that increases over time as you age as well. And also depends on what region you're in. So those are some of the costs that seniors or people who are retired, especially seniors, need to consider as you are thinking about your medical needs.
Okay. And we don't want to let those thoughts of medical needs get too far out of mind, but at the same time, we need to talk about seniors and housing costs.
Yeah. In 2016, it was a survey done. About a third of household age 65 and older spend more than a third of their income on housing. So that's either through mortgages or keeping up on your house, because over time, you have to do repairs on your house. And the report really noted that older adults spend a significant portion of their income on housing. They sacrifice other necessities like food and healthcare, unfortunately. Same report also pointed out that increasing rates of homelessness among older adults and a shortage of accessible housing for adults with functional limitations also was significant challenges for the age group as well. So, really looking at what housing looks like. We talked about in the beginning of our call, can I age in place? Yes, but as you get older, we talked about this, I think, in the previous phone calls. Are you going to live in the same area? Are your children going to be around? Are there people around who will be able to take care of you, or be able to help you maintain your home?
Right.
Sometimes, if you don't have the money, you're not going to pay for the thing that needs to be repaired. But over time, it starts to deteriorate and it becomes a problem, and it becomes a health hazard. So are you able to keep up living in that home over time as repairs need to be done? And that's going to be an extra cost as well. And that's why I think a lot of people think about, okay, let me just go into a retirement community or senior living facility. Maybe that may be a little bit more because people will be able to maintain those things. But if you're aging in place in your own house, that's one of the costs that you have to consider. That either a lot of people may have had their mortgage paid off, but you still have to have upkeep on your
Right.
home. And like I said, that could be a significant portion. And then in this report was really, a significant portion of their income was going towards housing. And unfortunately, they were sacrificing food and the necessities of medical care just to keep up with housing costs as well. So those are really some things to consider when you're thinking about housing. Is if you move to a different area, do you age in place? And if so, what is your strategy or what is your game plan in order to pay for the increased costs over time for maintenance? Will there be people there that will be able to help you do maintenance costs and or repairs? Or do you look at maybe a living facility that you can relocate to, that things are going to be taken care of if there's a broken staff or you need, a picture done or things like that. Um, things to consider as you're thinking about aging in place.
Yes. And I remember when my dad got to the point where he started to think about that, and he decided to move to uh, one of those communities where you age in place and
Mhm.
as he puts it, slide down the hill eventually.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Right. And so he was telling us kids that he had decided to do this. He didn't consult with any of us before,
Mhm.
but he had made made a contract with a place, and he's still living in the independent living part of it. But I got such a kick out of it because he said, all of you kids live all over the country and none of you are going to bring me chicken soup if I need it. So he was saying that, you know, as far as making sure he had food security as well as housing security, he thought that this was a decision that he needed to make. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's, one of the things that about the housing is food security. If people are foregoing, food and healthcare just to maintain, to stay in their homes, maybe there's a better solution. And then, like I said, increasing rates of homelessness among older adults as well, which
mhm,
is very alarming statistic that you have to think about when you talk about the housing for seniors.
mhm, absolutely. Okay, well, you mentioned isolation earlier, so we might as well realize that that's a bigger topic than just an ancillary part of our discussion. So let's talk a
Yeah,
little bit about isolation and mobility.
yeah, and I know this is probably not a whole lot to do with money, but thinking about, I have a colleague, and I think a couple of years ago he had started a support group where uh, he taught it. I can't remember the name of it, but it really addressed the loneliness of seniors.
Mhm,
And people don't realize that not having social connections are really important. And social, as we can probably attest to last year, we were in quarantine, and unfortunately, some people were in quarantine by themselves. There were high levels of depression, for people who were living alone going
mhm,
through it.
right.
Um, Good thing, of course, we had Zoom and stuff like this that people could connect, but having being socially isolated and loneliness can lead to, worsened health for seniors, which increases, of course, the health care, and then really hinders their ability to perform basic daily tasks. That's why, maybe going into a little bit of a funk or depression.
Mhm,
Older adults also face mobility impairments, which can leave them unable to socialize with friends outside of the home as a result of trouble walking, moving, really keeping up with balance. Now, I know AARP did a study report that 17% of seniors are isolated, and that is really facing the increase of about 26%, sorry, increased risk of early death as a result of just feeling lonely. So loneliness and mobility issues can not only, of course, um, really make impact on seniors, but financially, if you're not able to keep up your health or
mhm,
you're becoming immobile, that has a lot to do with increased costs as well. So really understanding what the isolation and mobility, and at the end of the call, there's a few resources that I want to share in each of the areas that we talked about, because this is become a huge issue, as well as more boomers start to age, older boomers start to age into retirement, and of course the later part of their years, maybe a partner has passed away, or children are a little bit older and they're not visiting as often as they
mhm,
had in the beginning. Um, that becomes an issue with having just social connections, which is very important as you're considering, um, aging in place as well. Are people going to be able to come visit? Do you have family that's able to visit? Do you have friends? Do you have like that kind of that network that will be able to keep an eye on you? Because like I said, over time, you just kind of unfortunately deteriorate, and
Mhm.
you don't want to do anything. For I know a long time after my father had passed away, my mother was living alone. She was fine, from the beginning, and then as it got longer and longer, it's been, probably almost 20 years since my dad passed away. And now my mom's in an assisted living facility, as you know.
Mhm.
But when she was living on her own, she was isolated a lot. People would go visit, but not having a whole social network, I think really kind of put her toll on her to
Mhm.
really connect her to people. And eventually, she has dementia now. And I'm not sure, if that had led to just not having any interaction and bring exercises and things like that to communicate. But
Right.
that's kind of what loneliness and does to you, is really just doing the same thing, not having the social connection, not having maybe some exercises to do, or just having, connections with other people that will be able to keep you up a little bit, as well. So it's a huge issue that I believe people have to think about over time, especially if you have, a spouse that passes away, or you don't have family that's nearby, really making sure you stay in the community connected in some way.
Right. I ran into a former neighbor who's, I'm not quite sure how much older than I am she is, but I'm quite sure that she is older than me. Um, I ran into her today, and she had just been coming from a caregiver support group, and
Mhm.
she you could tell that she was lonely because she just started talking to me, and it was very hard for me to stop talking to her because I
Yeah.
didn't want to be rude. But
Mhm.
but basically, she was talking about that her um, she referred to him as her boyfriend. So when I knew her, she was a widow. So apparently, since I've known her, she's gotten into this relationship, but he's got dementia. So
Mhm.
she's now become caregiver for him. And so she
Yeah.
was talking about the importance of getting out to going to this caregiver support group and how important that was for
Mhm.
her to have fellow people that understood what a caregiver goes through. Because I think that being a caregiver who has, no one else in your immediate family unit, it's pretty much like probably very close to being alone.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then just having people that, like you said, that's able to understand what she may be going through,
Hmm.
and then really just giving her some relief as well, to be
Right,
able to get out and socialize. So yeah,
right,
and you understand how that goes, where you want to definitely be compassionate and being
right,
able to speak with them because you know what they may be going through, as
right,
well. Hmm.
exactly. Now I think we got a couple more points here to cover.
Hmm.
So the next one I believe is cost of living. We're back
Hmm.
to that.
Yeah, back to that. I really just kind of want to emphasize that, because cost of living is weighed against older people's income, and
Hmm.
we talked about the elder index. It really shows that half of singles, or 23% of couples, lack the financial resources just to cover the basic needs as well. So the risk of rising cost of living that may place them at an economic disadvantage, really potentially at a lower cost, I'm sorry, is really potentially higher over
Hmm.
time. So really factoring in where are you going to live? Like, our conversation is about, can you afford to live where you are currently right now? And that's, you have to think about, right when you retire. Yes, you may be able to do that, but look at it for the long term. Are you going to be able to afford the cost of living in your particular region, based on looking at that elder index over that 30 plus year retirement?
Hmm.
If you think about 3 to 4% as an inflation rate, things are going to be higher. I was just at the gas station the other day, and I'm like, in our area, it's probably about, for 89, because I put 89 versus 87 in my car, about $3.40 or so.
Hmm.
And so that can eat up a lot versus what it used to be last year. Of course, we weren't driving, but I think it got down to almost $1.75 or something
Right.
when we weren't driving our cars. But that's one of the things you have to consider is that bread's going to cost more, milk's going to cost more. All of these goods and services that you're used to buying, of course, is going to cost more in the future. So
Mhm.
that's where you have to consider, cost of living in areas as well. Now we know that remote working has really changed that a lot. I was listening to the Wall Street Journal report yesterday, and I think the number one place last year, no, actually last month was can't remember, someplace in Idaho, believe it or not. And then that got bumped off, and now the number one place is Billings, Montana, because a lot of people can work at different places now
Right.
and not live, especially a lot of the tech sector that was in San Francisco or, Silicon Valley and all of those high cost areas.
Mhm.
If I could do my job in, Idaho or Billings, Montana, that's, beautiful and the cost of living is a lot cheaper. Why not do that? So, over time, maybe we have to kind of see what that effect would be in certain areas. Maybe people are working remote or continue to retire. If they're working remote, maybe they enjoy it. Maybe they will continue to live in that area where the cost of living is a lot cheaper, I'm sure, in Billings, Montana than it is
Right.
in Chicago or right outside of Milwaukee, where you may be in Northern Virginia.
Mhm.
And so I think over time, we have to kind of see what the cost of living effect will be from this whole pandemic situation that we're in because of remote work. But just think over time, we know things are going to get more expensive. Things, bread, I say like bread, milk, gas, whatever you're going to spend things on, just know that they're going to be a lot more expensive 20 years from now, or 30 years from now, or 40 years from now.
Mhm. I saw that an article. It was also from the Wall Street Journal, but it's probably an actual article as opposed to the report that you're talking about. But it talked about Coeur d'Alene and Billings, Montana, and
Yeah.
it said that what I was trying to think is to take a person who maybe like lives now in New York City or LA or even in your DC area like you do,
Yeah.
and move you to Billings, Montana. I think that we would also have to look at the culture shock of,
We have to think about the culture shock, yeah.
because as much as the air might be clean and the cost of living might be affordable, there's going to be things that people that come from very urban areas are going to not have the same kind of access to in Montana. And I've never been to Montana, but I had a friend in grade school who went there for a vacation, and she came back and she said, well, I loved it. It was a beautiful place. And I know why they call it Big Sky, because the sky is really big. I'm going, I don't quite understand what that means, but I think the sky is the same. But she seemed to think that the sky is bigger.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. And then you have, different things to worry about. I do have a client that lives out in Idaho. This was prior actually to the pandemic for other reasons, but the other day she posted that there was a moose in her backyard versus the dogs that she's used to in our area. So yeah, you have to consider certain things that you would see.
Yes, absolutely. I have a friend who lives in somewhere in Colorado. It's not Boulder. It doesn't matter. It's not one of the largest. It's one of the top 5 cities in Colorado, but it's not Boulder or Denver. And she posted a picture a couple of years ago of a mountain lion that was on their roof and peering in. She apparently has clear story windows in her bathroom, and so this mountain lion was peering in through the windows into her bathroom, and she took a picture of it, and I'm going, well, I cannot imagine having a mountain lion on my roof.
Imagine on the roof and you're trying to take a bath and you're looking at the mountain lion. Yeah.
Yes. If I didn't have the Facebook picture of it, I would tell you, Pam, that I don't think I would believe it happened,
I
but
don't think I would
she,
believe that either. Yeah,
but, but she had a picture. So either there was some photoshopping going on or it really, really happened.
yeah, or it really was. Exactly. That's pretty funny.
Right. Okay, well, have we gotten to the point where we should talk about point number 10? What are some services and support that can help? Now that
Yeah,
we've given the
yeah,
doom
and now
and
that
gloom
I've
to everyone.
kind of put the gloom and doom out
Right.
there, let's see if there's some services. In some community states, there are going to be a lot of, maybe subsidized houses, more generous nutrition programs, and more
Mhm.
opportunities really to take advantage of. They can really offset some of these things. So what I look at is really some of the key areas that we looked at. So we talked about, what did we talk about initially? We talked about um, retirement income.
Mhm.
So let's talk about that. I'm gonna go into my notes for research. Okay, so if we're looking at retirement income programs that may be able to help, Pension Rights Center, that's where I want to start because a lot of people are in pensions that may be underwater that are coming back and saying, hey, now we don't know if we're going to be able to pay you the full pension that we thought we
Mhm.
would.
Right.
The Pension Rights Center is really a nonprofit consumer organization that helps promote retirement security through counseling, legal services, and government agencies. So really the Pension Rights Center. Justice and Aging is also a legal organization that combats senior poverty, expands the access of affordable health care costs, and also promotes economic security. So those are kind of two things to think about in that space, the Pension Rights Center and also the Justice and Aging. Regards to health, the Administration of Aging, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has an agency dedicated really to providing seniors with supportive services that can help them live independently in their own communities. The National Institute of Aging, I'm sure you've probably heard that. That's a new NIH research center devoted to the research of senior citizen health that provides
Mhm.
information to the public and to healthcare communities on how to protect the well-being of their seniors. There's also the American Geriatric Society, also another nonprofit for geriatric doctors and healthcare providers, really including social workers, advocates for research and education in areas of quality care for seniors. And of course, there's the Medicare Rights Center. Um, I use this a lot, really, to as a resource. It's a nonprofit that helps ensure access to affordable health care for seniors through counseling, education services, all of the public policy initiatives as well, working with them to understand and navigate their rights and as it relates to Medicare.
Mhm.
Like I said, I use that as a resource a lot. Regarding isolation, there's Senior Corps, which is a network of national service programs, really allowing seniors to enable them to volunteer and become involved in their communities in ways to aid education, disaster relief, and also mentoring and elder care. So Senior Corps, that's a way to kind of get people out of their homes and able to really help them in the community, maybe volunteer. Um, if if any women on the call, we always know Red Hat Society is available
Mhm.
as a social organization for senior women, really
Mhm.
to meet new friends, reconnect with old friends. You have fun because you get a chance to wear a nice red hat
Mhm.
and things like that. So I always do that. And of course, AARP has tons of information. The Foundation Connect program that they have dedicated to really ending loneliness and social isolation for vulnerable seniors through the AARP Foundation's Connect to Affect program. That's what they have there. And then
Okay.
also a program called Generations. It's an intergenerational organization connecting seniors and younger people through mentorship and community engagement. Roughly 92% of Americans believe that intergenerational collaboration can help reduce loneliness. I know I don't know if it was you that had mentioned before, where they were renting out some college dorms to older,
Right.
yeah. And so that collaboration, and I did read about that and heard about that as well, is that you have generations that are able to connect. And so you have the younger people who are watching them, and then the older people who are really getting engaged with young life, and they're keeping them young and active as well.
Hmm.
And that may be a good areas too. I also heard a few years back where there were bringing young children from preschools into nursing homes to help kind of integrate that intergenerational thing to really just kind of keep seniors engaged and fun and things like that. So Generations is another organization that is really kind of putting that collaboration with intergenerational to help seniors combat and reduce the loneliness part in their lives as well.
It's good for the
Uh,
kids too.
and it's good for the kids too. Yeah, you get
Mhm.
a lot of good stories and that sort of thing. And
Right.
and I think for some reason I think young people think older people are so much fun or
Hmm.
funny or
Right.
and I think vice versa. I think a lot of
Hmm.
like what are these kids up to? So I
Right.
think overall I think it's a win-win for both of them. Regarding debt, Legal Advocates of Seniors and People with Disability is also an organization for legal advocates, really to help seniors navigate debt without harassment from debt collectors and creditors, because that happens a lot of times. Is that seniors fall behind, and then you get the rough calls with creditors, and it just seems to be too much to deal with. There's also counseling services for seniors through it's an organization called NCOA. They have a debt hotline toolkit available for customize your debt and your money management counseling services for seniors. Really taking a look at that, and of course, consulting any financial advisors or anything like that if you want to take a look at how to reduce debt. Regarding housing, Department of Energy has a weatherization assistance program. So it really helps to reduce the energy costs and increase energy efficiency for low income households. Really the preference being for older Americans in there, over time,
Hmm.
um, really having older appliances and things like that, you may not be as energy efficient, which of course increases the cost for your electric bill and your heating
Right.
bill and all of that. If there's a way to have the weatherization assistance program, and of course, you can always look in your local city or county. They have a lot of programs as well. Again, NCOA has a Use Your Home to Stay at Home program. It's a approved consumer booklet for seniors, really to inform them of their home equity, reverse mortgages if they need that, or any other options for seniors who want to stay in their homes. Um, and then there's the National Council of Aging.
Okay.
That's available, always has, and information on how to independently live in your home for as long as they can.
Hmm.
And free aging planning handbooks are available for the National Aging in Place Council. That's what that one is, but it is through the National Council of Aging
Okay.
as well. So those are really
Excellent.
resources to take a look at for support. It's not one of those areas that you have to feel that you go at it alone. There's a lot of organizations and also networks that can help seniors who are maybe experiencing any of these areas that we went over tonight.
Hmm. All right. Excellent. I've got a couple of questions to run past you as well.
Okay.
Um, the first one, the Wall Street Journal recently reported that U.S. median home prices rose to just over 600 or 363,000 in June, which is up over 20% from a year ago, and that's due to strong demand. And I know that we've all been hearing about how people are snapping up homes almost as fast as they're listed,
Oh
and
yeah.
uh, and often for more than the listing price. So a lot of the increase in home prices stems, I think, from COVID, more people working from home, as you've mentioned
Hmm.
earlier,
Yeah.
and the recognition that many people can live and work from anywhere. So with regard to our discussion of increased cost of living, and given that our homes are often our largest asset, I'm curious, what impact do you see that the increase in our home values has with regard to the rest of the cost of living, uh, the COLA situation
Yeah, the
adjustment?
COLA situation. Yeah, I mean, it's good for people who are sellers and not so good for buyers.
Mhm.
So, that's the whole double-edged sword. If I sell my house and really get good resources, but where am I going to live? Type scenario.
Mhm.
In terms of the cost of living, it's been bumping up a little bit. I think it's more, and a couple of my realtor friends said that they are cooling down a little bit, at least in this area. But that's kind of the overinflated. I don't think that's really affecting any of the other costs in any particular areas. Right now, it's just kind of isolated to the housing market based
Mhm.
on our situation with COVID.
Right.
But I think over the long term, I think they will start to become get in alignment where they were before. So I've been encouraging people, especially if you're going to age in place, stay in your homes as long as you can. Because if you don't have, at least if you're not going to, let's say, a seniors plus community or something like that, it's really going to be hard to find housing that's going to be as affordable. So you might as well, stay put as long as you can.
Well, that's one of the things I've heard is that, you might sell that home for an astronomical amount compared to what you bought it for, what you thought you would be able to sell it for. But
Mhm.
then when you go, if you don't have something already in mind to buy, you might
Yeah,
discover that you can't afford anything. That
exactly. Yeah.
even if you're downsizing, the
Mhm.
prices for something that's downsized might still be more than the money that you thought was such a huge amount when you.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of funny thing that I saw online. Somebody had posted, it's like, yeah, this is what the housing market looks like now, and it was like a tree posted of a tree house. And it's like $200,000 coming soon.
Right, yes. I like that. It's probably a little bit more too true than we want to think about. So,
Exactly.
okay, one more quick question. If we decide to take advantage of the current low mortgage rates and move rather than try to age in place, what should we be thinking about from your financial advisor's point of view in selecting a new place to live? I guess I want to look at downsizing versus moving to another part of the country.
Mm-hmm, hmm. Still, you're going to run into the same problem where you need to figure out a place to live that's going to be hopefully less. When you
Mhm.
downsize, hopefully you'll get a property or take the proceeds and maybe buy down on a mortgage. So you just maybe have a small mortgage
Mhm.
as well. I had a couple of clients do that where they were able to get into a new property or at least actually a new community where they were having it built. But even that's going to take a while. I think about 6 to 9 months for that. But she was able to take the proceeds and then buy it down her mortgage significantly in order to afford it. Make it affordable as she was in before, maybe just a little bit higher.
Mhm.
But those are some have to run the numbers, especially consult with your advisors to make sure it makes sense in order to move out of one place and then downsize, but then it may be just as much as you had before. So you're not really saving and you haven't really taken advantage of cashing out of your property. In hopes that you would be able to reduce your level of expenditures. That's
Mhm.
ideal. Or take the proceeds from a property and maybe invest some and then say put some into the house. So that's a combination that could happen before, but now that the prices have increased so much, it's really hard to play that strategy right now.
Okay, so what you're saying is that as much as we like to think that, hey, that house that we are living in is appreciated so much, we'll going to make so much money when we sell it. You're saying, but where are you going to go,
Where are you going to go?
right?
Exactly. Where are you going to go? And, I really have encouraged people to refinance, especially
Hmm.
during this low interest rate environment. That way you can lower your costs as well. And then, eventually you'll still have significant equity in it,
Mhm.
then you can go ahead and sell it at some later point in time.
All right. Well, as usual, you've been a fountain of great information, and I
Mhm.
thank you again for another excellent Zoom call and providing us with this great advice on why we might or might not want to be able to afford to comfortably retire in place. Our next discussion, you and I haven't discussed a topic yet, but
Mhm.
it's my count of the calendar looks like we're talking about Thursday, August 26th at the same time.
Mhm.
And of course, audience, we'll be doing another Zoom call, and that Pam and I will hope that you will join us then. Is there anything else that you'd want to add, Pam, before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I would probably encourage people to, look for their elder index. I believe in that a Forbes article or nextavenue.org article. They have some pretty good maps on seeing where your elder index, depending on where you live. Um, I would encourage people to take a look at that as they're doing their retirement planning.
Is that the only place that was the only place that I could find the elder indexes?
Yeah, that was the
Is-
only place that I saw it as well, was those two resources.
Okay.
But if I can find a different place to look for it, I'll definitely forward that to any listeners, and so you can
Okay.
post it on the website or the Facebook group.
Sure. And other than that, when Pam gave me the article originally, as I mentioned at the top of the call, I did post it to NABBW Facebook page, so you could go through the NABBW Facebook pages until you find a link for it there. So, and I want to also add, for that long list of wonderful information that you gave there, if people weren't writing things down
Yeah.
as fast as you spoke, they could probably contact you.
Of course. Yeah.
And that would
Exactly.
be at Pamela@jacksonsams.com, or of course, I want to make sure they know about your website at jacksonsams.com.
Correct. Yeah.
If you have any other questions for Pam, she's happy to field answers for your questions if you would just contact her at those locations. Now, if you want to know more about the National Association of Baby Boom Women, check out our website, nabbw.com. We have a forum at Boomer Women Speak, and our Facebook page is facebook.com/nabbw. And you can be assured that I always try to post as many articles as I can there that buttress with articles with topics that you and I have already talked about. So,
Exactly.
so I try to make it a live, living resource on that Facebook page. So that's the goal of it, and I hope people will continue to go there and get the information from it. So thank you, Pam. Thank you to our audience. We have enjoyed Zooming with everyone tonight, and so I'm going to say good night. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone. All right.
Bye,
Good night.
Pam.
Bye-bye.